Hello and welcome to Truth and Liberty. This is your host, Mike Lewis. In this episode, I thought I would do something a little different. So there's these tests, these quizzes out there you can take on the internet. And this particular one I'm going to be looking at today is the politicalcompass.org. I thought it'd be good to kind of go through this, show you guys, maybe help you guys get a better idea of where I'm at. And particularly because one of the things I've looked at these tests before, and I have never really been fully satisfied with the results of them. And I always find myself, as I go through these things, going, what? On the questions. In regards to, they ask things that are just really weird, or there's presuppositions that are behind each of these questions. And so, I often find it's really hard to actually give the kind of answer they're looking for, especially on this particular one, where it has it doesn't have a neutral option. So this is the Political Compass test. You can find this at politicalcompass.org/test. And it's supposed to tell you where you're at on that political spectrum. So I'm sure you've seen it before, where there's the four quadrants with the x-axis. The x-axis is economic, socialism versus free markets, and then the y-axis is sort of a cultural authority versus liberty type of, when it comes to do we legislate morality type of thing. So the x-axis would be the question of should we regulate the economy, and the y-axis should be should we regulate or should we control people's personal choices. And so sort of where you're at, how you answer these questions is supposed to tell you where you're at. If you're in the top left, you're a progressive Democrat liberal who wants, obviously if you're all the way in the top left corner, you would be socialist or communist, right? You want complete control of people's personal choices, according to a liberal definition, right? And you want complete economic control as well, so that there is forced equality and those kinds of things, right? If you're all the way on the top right, you would be like the alt-right version of, the worst of the worst in conservatism, right? You want Fred Phelps type of moral legislation, so that anybody who is a degenerate in society is controlled or arrested or executed or whatever, almost like a Sharia law or whatever the Christian American version of Sharia law is. And I know what some of you are thinking. I'm not going there yet. And then of course you want like economic liberty, right? So you want the rich people to be able to exploit the poor people and to keep all their money, right? And then in the bottom quadrant you have the liberty-minded folks, right? Where as far as like culture goes, on the bottom, so you would have your all the way on the bottom, you would have your anarchists, right? But there's the two kinds of anarchists, right? You've got the ancoms all the way on the left, who want this sort of, I don't know, somehow we'll get to ANCOM at some point, but I don't understand their worldview. It doesn't make any logical sense to me, just in the basic premise. But they want complete distribution of resources, and they don't want private property and everything. And yet somehow they believe they can do all this without a government. I don't get it. And then of course on the right would be the total bottom right corner would be the ANCAP purist, no government, no regulation of the economy, no regulation of personal choices, complete liberty. So taking this quiz is supposed to tell you where you stand on that. So without further ado, let's just dive in here. There are 6 pages of this thing, so who knows? This might need to be a multi-part episode. We will find out. So let's see here. Question number 1. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So I'm supposed to say whether I strongly disagree, I disagree, agree, or strongly agree. There's no neutral option here. So this is right off the bat, they're hitting you with a question that's like, what in the world are you even talking about here? There's so many of these terms that beg definition, and the problem is, it's not that these terms have no meaning, it's that these terms have meaning, and they're not telling you what it is. And you're left to sort of come up with your own interpretation. Because these things, if it's not clearly defined, you could answer one way or whatever based on what you think they're talking about, and they could be talking about something completely different. Now, it's not to take a postmodern words have no meaning view, but it's a reality. Words definitely have meaning, but words can be used by different people to refer to different things, right? I'll just take the idea of government, right? What do you mean by government? Well, government, typically, the typical concept of government that anybody who's gone to public school will tell you is government is the state. Government is the entity that has the territorial monopoly on the use of force, and they have the right to set laws and make laws and enforce the laws in the area. And of course, we have to obey the government, right? Well, we would say, as I've talked about in a previous episode, we would say, well, biblically, the definition of government is more about the task of actually enforcing the lex talionis justice principles, and that doesn't have to involve a territorial monopoly, and that it doesn't give anybody who serves in that role the authority to set laws or define morality or define legal and illegal on the basis of anything other than the principle of, if there's a victim, then the person who hurt the victim has to either make them whole or be hurt in equal measure. So there has to be a balancing of the scales there. So right off the bat, I mean, if this question asks about the government, what did they mean by the government? Because in a certain definition, we could say one thing, but is that what they mean? And we have to be very careful with these things, and not knowing what they mean could cause us to answer one way when they are going to interpret our results in another way. So this is one where I was talking about, say, if economic globalization is inevitable, economic globalization would be, I would assume, would be defined as complete open free trade, to where there's no protectionism, there are no tariffs, there are no government regulations on who can do business across national lines. This would be that such international trade happens without the aid of trade agreements like the TPP or NAFTA or any of those kinds of things, right? So it's just private citizens over here happen to do business with private citizens over in Europe. Aided by great advancements in technology. I can do all kinds of stuff, right? Just with PayPal, and we got all kinds of resources available to us that we can just go in and do business with people overseas, and it's amazing, all right? But does the government have to regulate that? So here's the question, right? So a globalization like that is inevitable. So it should primarily serve the humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So what does it mean to serve the interests of humanity? What does it mean? What is a transnational corporation? So a transnational corporation would be like McDonald's that has branches in multiple locations. I don't understand what they're trying to get at here. Right? And implied in this question is this view. I mean, there's this presupposition in the question that a transnational corporation is a bad thing, right? I mean, that's obviously right there off the bat. That you're just assuming that transnational corporation is a bad thing. Why would that be a bad thing? Why would a transnational corporation be a bad thing? Well, maybe because corporations are bad things. Well, then we have to define corporation. What is a corporation, right? But from the basic definition of a corporation that you learn in business school is it's just a limited liability organization where you have a company that exists as a separate legal entity from the owners. The owners are people who invest in the business, buy stock in the business, own shares in the company. So you have multiple people who own and operate the company, and the company then goes and operates in a certain way. The individual people are shielded from liability in the sense that, if I own a business and I put my own personal capital into the business, and the business fails, I'm on the hook for the debts of the business. But if we have this alternative entity like a corporation that, me and a whole bunch of other people go in and pool our resources and say we're going to start this company, and then that company fails, and the idea is that no individual one of us has to bear the load of paying off the debts of that company. And there are some good things and some bad things about that. But the typical or calm or socialist or liberal, progressive, whatever, the leftist view of corporations is that there's these evil entities that have this power to control people, and even to the point where they can they can coerce us into using their products somehow. They have some sort of power over us where they can make us make choices that we wouldn't normally make. And or they can all of them are inherently monopolies, one way or another. And so I guess that is what this question is assuming, that such a transnational corporation would be an entity that is that kind of power, I guess. I mean, I don't know. What's the difference between a company that can operate with locations like a Wendy's or whatever? I mean, just even take McDonald's, for crying out loud. They're already this quote unquote transnational corporation. They have locations all over the world. What's the problem with that? Ultimately, what's the problem with that? The assumption, I guess, is that they're getting rich off of the poor people. McDonald's goes into India or something and they start selling hamburgers. That's a funny concept. They go into India and they start selling veggie burgers to the Indian people, at this super low price or whatever. And somehow that's exploitative. Somehow, I don't know how, but they think that's exploitative for them to go in and start, selling food. And the liberal idea is that, I don't know. I mean, just insert all these presuppositions about, I guess the food being unhealthy, or the fact that the jobs are not great jobs, or I don't know. I really don't know what they think is exploitative about that. I mean, is it any worse for them to do that there than it is to do it here? I mean, there's a McDonald's down the street from me. I can go buy burgers. I don't particularly, because I don't care all that much for McDonald's food. In general, I don't eat fast food. If I do, I'm probably going to go somewhere else. But that's my personal choice. McDonald's has no power over me to make me eat at McDonald's. They have no power over the Indian people to make them eat at McDonald's. So I don't get where this idea is. But the liberal progressive mindset is that these corporations, they operate these locations, and McDonald's, they don't pay their workers a living wage, I guess, or whatever, and somehow all this wealth gets transferred from these poor people in these countries to this corporation. And look at how wealthy, how much money this corporation is drawing in from all the world, and they're sapping the resources. And ultimately, that boils down to this zero-sum game view of economics that is really the brainchild or the fledgling, won't die out descendant of the mercantilist ideas that Adam Smith destroyed hundreds of years ago. The idea was that there was a fixed amount of wealth in the world, and that if you trade, that wealth is leaving you and going somewhere else. And this idea shows up in protectionism all the time. Why should we send our jobs to China? Why should we buy Chinese products? We're helping China out. China is getting rich off of us because we do business with China. What? No. This is basic economics 101. When people engage voluntarily in trade, and this happens in any transaction, as long as both parties participate voluntarily, then they do so because both expect to benefit from the transaction. They expect that their life will be better off. And so they trade. If I need a pen and I have $5 and you've got a pen and I want your pen more than I want my $5 and you want my $5 more than I want your pen, and we trade, I pay you $5 and you give me your pen, we have both benefited because we both get something we value more than what we had. And if we didn't, then we would not engage in that trade. So this conspiracy theory idea that McDonald's gets rich by exploiting people, how? How do they force anybody to buy their product? They're not. There's nobody with a gun saying you must buy McDonald's. They don't have to eat there at all. McDonald's comes in and they sell a product that is convenient and affordable in a way that they might not have had before. And so people go and they buy it. Now, you could say, well, it's not super healthy or whatever, but and yet nobody's forcing them to eat it. We have to keep that in mind. Nobody is forcing anybody to eat at McDonald's. Except maybe, certain 4-year-olds force their parents to eat there from time to time. But that's beside the point. That's a category error. It's not even the same thing. Right, so, I've just spent 20 minutes already on the first question of this. See, this is brilliant. I'm really gonna have to go through this, and this is gonna have to be a multi-part episode. I'm gonna try and not let these be too long. My first couple podcast episodes were like 45 minutes long, and so I'm really gonna try to cut down on that. I don't want to allow that to. I don't want to bore you guys with super long videos. So I think probably we'll leave it at this. I will try to answer this question here as briefly as I can, and then come back and go on to the next one. And maybe after a series of like 35 of these or something like that, who knows how long this is going to take for me to get through this thing, we'll actually get to a point where we actually have an answer. So I don't know. So let's try to answer this question. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should serve humanity rather than the interest of transnational corporations. And see, this is where I have to say I can't answer this question. Because if we're assuming a free market, which, who knows, are we or are we not? That's the thing. And I insist that we have to assume a free market. Because we're talking about what should happen. It should. So there should be a free market. So are we assuming a free market? If we're assuming a free market, then it will serve the interests of humanity by serving the interests of transnational corporations. Because humans run and patronize corporations. And everybody on a free market engages in their economic activity through voluntary mutual consent. So, yeah, the people who work for McDonald's because they expect to be better off than if they didn't work for McDonald's. The people who eat at McDonald's because they expect to be better off than if they did not eat at McDonald's. And McDonald's gets money, the people get food, or they get money, and just because, but the progressives say, well, you can't measure how better off somebody who ate at McDonald's is in a dollar value, and so money left their pocket and went to McDonald's, and so therefore they've been exploited. But that's irrational. It's only looking at half the side of the economic equation. And so I would insist on saying that, yeah, it should serve the interests of humanity. And it will do that through the venue of transnational corporations. Now, obviously, we talk about corporations and we say, the corporations that exist, and our concept of corporations right now is really skewed because of the way that these huge corporations like McDonald's can thrive and can operate in ways, and they can achieve huge sizes and these unnatural economies of scale because of protections from state governments. And so they're able to get away with things, and they're able to do things that they might not be able to on the free market. because they go and lobby for regulations, and they go and the regulations that hurt their competition, etc. And so because of all that, our concept of corporations isn't really accurate. It's not what it would exist on the free market. A transnational corporation would just be a company that operates and does business with other companies and people. And it's just people running this company. People who are trying to better their own lives by serving others through voluntary mutual exchange. Nothing wrong with that. And the interests of everybody is served. Everybody gets better off than that. Free market exchange like this is the single mechanism that has raised people out of poverty throughout history. And so, yeah, I agree. It should primarily serve humanity. So I'm going to say agree here. Of course, by doing that, I know what's going to happen. I know they're going to skew me towards the left because of this. Because they are assuming that I'm thinking about corporations the way they're thinking about corporations. And I'm thinking, man, these corporations are evil. Right? And so, right off the bat there, I mean, first question hits you with a great whammy. So, that's a great start for this. I hope you tune in next time as we continue to go through this. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this won't take too long before we can actually get to an answer and you can see where I stand. For now, this is Truth and Liberty. Thanks for tuning in.